Well, friends, grab your popcorn because today's financial landscape sure feels like a bad comedy. It's got some real absurd plot twists thrown our way, courtesy of some global powerhouses and clueless governments. But hey, it's not necessarily a happy story. Let's talk about the messy state of global economics that's been hitting headlines these days. Unemployment spikes in the US, another chapter in Russia's endless battle to turn Europe's winter cold, a central bank in Argentina that's bleeding cash faster than an open wound, and not to mention some corporate spectacles that are bound to make you question their judgment. Times are tough, folks, real tough. Inflation soars, salaries stagnate, and once great economies now appear to be balancing on a pin, threatened by wars, political mismanagement, or global challenges. It's like watching a perfect storm, with each factor feeding into the other to create one colossal mess in the market. And if you're out there wondering how we hit this point, hold tight, because we're pulling no punches in today's analysis. Let's kick things off with the situation in the US. Federal Reserve Chair, Jerome Powell, had the audacity to say the labor market remains in solid shape just last week. Solid? Really, Jerome? Because rising unemployment claims tell a different story. Week after week, the number of Americans filing for jobless benefits creeps up, reaching levels not seen in over 3 years. As of now, continuing applications, a trusty indicator to gauge just how many remain on benefits, are soaring. More people than ever before are struggling to land jobs, and yet the Fed is still signaling this isn't a concerning sign. Well, someone must have forgotten to notify the American workers. Here's the thing, when unemployment claims rise, it usually means people aren't finding jobs. And it sure doesn't help that companies are tightening their belts due to rising interest rates, which the Fed itself has continuously hiked to combat inflation. Powell gives with one hand and takes with the other. In reality, the labor market's cooling faster than a tub of ice cream left out in December. Even if he refuses to admit it just yet, the writing is on the wall, economic slowdown is here. The Federal Reserve has spent much of the last 2 years trying to tame inflation, but all it's done is put tremendous stress on American businesses and households. Higher interest rates make borrowing more expensive, limiting corporate investments, reducing consumer spending, and ultimately leading to layoffs. As layoffs ripple throughout industries, we see it reflected in growing unemployment numbers. This isn't a minor hiccup, this is a sign of deeper cracks spreading across the economic foundation. Let's solidify this argument with some numbers, shall we? According to the U.S. Department of Labor, continuing jobless claims have now surged to 1.75 million, markedly higher than previous estimates. Comparatively, pre-pandemic levels were averaging around 1.6 million, demonstrating how out of touch Powell's assessment might be. On top of that, weekly unemployment claims shot up to around 235,000 as of early December 2023, further painting a bleaker picture. Economists out there, avert your eyes, because these numbers point toward a recession. The fact is that even while Powell touts about soft landings, the exact reverse might be on the horizon, an inevitable hard landing, where unemployment rises even further, job creation slows, and eventually consumer confidence tanks. What happens next? Consumers spend less, demand plummets, and companies cut back further to keep afloat, a textbook recession taking place right before our eyes while leadership buries its head in the sand. Next up on the geopolitical disaster show, Russia. Oh, Putin sure knows how to keep the world on its toes with his annual winter artillery display that's become as predictable as Christmas caroling. This year's attacks on Ukraine were yet another bid to cripple the region by knocking out its energy infrastructure, because freezing is apparently Putin's strategy to bring Ukraine to its knees. Holiday spirit, Russian style, of course, didn't just stop with missiles. Reports are emerging of a civilian airliner being downed, déjà vu, anyone? Malaysia Airlines Flight 17 all over again. Remember that incident back in 2014? The Russian military was linked to firing a missile in Ukraine's airspace, killing 298 people aboard flight MH17. Now we're seeing disturbingly similar reports with 38 dead, this time near the Caspian Sea. History repeats itself. But hold on tight because this missile drama isn't intended to be just about intimidation tactics. Remember we're talking about energy security too. Western Europe is still largely dependent on Russian oil and gas, despite all the sanctions. And now, reports are rolling in about further foul play in the Baltic Sea with subsea power links and data cables being mysteriously disrupted, pointing back to, you guessed it, Russian-linked vessels. What does this do? It destabilizes energy security across Europe, leaving consumers at the mercy of price hikes and governments scrambling to secure supply. This takes us back to 2022's energy crisis post-invasion. We saw gas prices skyrocket across Europe, reaching 5 times the medium-term average during peak times, and while energy prices have abated slightly since last winter, this latest round of Russian theatrics could be gearing us all up for another spike. Take Finland's subsea energy link going offline, for instance. Russia's denial of involvement might feel a bit hollow after years of similar incidents. But the important takeaway is what this behavior does to the energy market. Winter always puts pressure on Europe's energy grids, but this kind of sabotage threatens overall supply, ramping up costs and pushing European governments further toward Nord Stream-style dependency, all while continuously feeding volatility into the market. While geopolitical chessboards are shaking the foundation of energy markets, Wall Street is facing its own turbulent seas. More specifically, the Secured Overnight Financing Rate, SOFR, an important rate used by banks to assess the cost of overnight lending, has just spiked to 4.4%, up from 4.31%. Doesn't seem much at first glance. Look closer, this increase signals that more banks are facing higher borrowing costs due to tighter year-end balance sheet constraints exacerbated by Federal Reserve monetary tightening. It could easily trigger more funding volatility than usual banking cycles experience. Remember, banks form the backbone of the economy. Failure to stabilize overnight rates can send shockwaves that dry up liquidity in other markets. Rising borrowing rates tighten liquidity access for businesses and the lending market, delaying investments, cutting off cash flows, and eventually hurting real economy sectors, including jobs. We're already battling high inflation and modest consumer spending because most Americans are dealing with increasing loan repayment burdens under this high-interest landscape. Add in soaring funding rates, and banks will pass even greater costs onto consumers. Across the Atlantic, Argentina's new president, Javier Milei, is embroiled in what can only be described as a fiscal suicide mission. Only a few weeks since taking office, Milei eliminated key import taxes, thinking it would spark Argentina's growth engine. But what did it actually do? Boom, a massive stampede from companies demanding access to dollars to pay for their imports within the already fragile economy. Could Milei have predicted that poorly strategized tax cuts would backfire so spectacularly? Possibly. But even Argentine heroes can't stop the fundamentals of economics from kicking in. His decision triggered a grotesque depletion of $599 million worth of Argentina's already drained foreign reserves in just one day. Argentina's central bank is bleeding out its precious reserves at a scale it simply cannot afford. In case you haven't been keeping track, Argentina's reserves are already on thin ice due to debt repayments soaring nearly $9 billion by 2025, half of which is coming due next month. Now with next to no money left available, inflation that's exceeding 120%, and a population losing purchasing power by the week, there's little Milei can do except watch the disaster unfold. Transitioning from global calamities. Let's shift gears for a bit. Alibaba might be making headlines in Asia for an unexpected move into the competitive South Korean market, dining on market share scraps of giants like Kuong through a $4 billion joint venture between AliExpress International and Market. But on closer inspection, it reveals that China's once indomitable e-commerce leadership is slowing down with domestic growth stagnating. That's right, China hasn't just been tumbling economically for the last couple of years. Its once booming internet companies are now scrambling to expand offshore to make up for their internal troubles. Sure, the venture could give Alibaba access to more e-commerce prowess, but let's be real, it's a desperation move more than a power play. Lastly, our final topic, China's geopolitical influence. Xi's ambitions to elevate China to superpower status have been severely tested: economic slowdowns, property bubbles, and trade decoupling from the West. He's managed to dodge most doomsday bullets so far, but a wildcard event threatens his vision: Donald Trump. Trump is again leading in the polls for the 2024 election, believe it or not, and there's no question that if he retakes office, the same neck-breaking tensions that escalated the US-China trade war during his presidency will worsen. China would face tariffs, sanctions, and chokeholds on high-tech supply chains. China's game of slow but certain technological progress could face unprecedented shocks, especially as its semiconductor industry faces US export bans. Xi knows that a Trump-led White House could very well derail his trajectory of global ascension. So my friends, what is the takeaway from all this? Brace yourselves for a bumpy ride. The combined weight of geopolitical conflicts, economic mismanagement, and turbulent markets means we're likely entering a period of sustained volatility. Whether it's unemployment creeping up in the US, Russia's continuing meddling in energy, or reckless fiscal policies wrecking Argentina's economy, every corner of the globe grapples with the same problem: instability. What's the real solution? Well, don't wait around for Powell or any other world leader to figure it out. Instead, it's the people, businesses, and professionals like you who'll need to stay sharp, adapt to evolving conditions, and prepare for more rough seas ahead. As I always say, don't be fooled by the official narrative. When markets quake, they do so in ways staged events can't predict, so stay informed, stay vigilant, and keep questioning everything. Stay rich, stay smart, and I'll see you next time.